Good morning.
Good
Welcome.
morning.
Uh, for our audience, I'm Brenda Kirk, and I'm a mobilizer for the Evangelical Immigration Table and the National Immigration Forum's Bibles, Badges, and Business. And I have a very special friend with me today, Andrea. And Andrea, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah. Well, my name is Andrea Castaneda-Lauver, and I am an associate slash co-youth pastor in Houston, Texas, and I'm also Nazarene Youth International's South Texas VP.
That's a new title.
It is, yes, it is. The district needed a VP. Nazarene Youth International is just our national youth association for the Nazarene Church, and we split off into different districts. And South Texas needed a VP.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank
quite an
you.
honor.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So, just tell me a little bit about what's going on in your community, in your life. I know that you have your first house, you have
Yeah.
a new job, and
Yes.
now a new responsibility within the district. So tell me
Yeah.
just a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so my husband Kenneth and I, who's also my co-youth pastor, we moved in December because we felt God leading us to leave the church that we had been at, that we really loved. Great people and really great students, and it was a hard move, but we felt like God was leading us to Houston First Church in Houston. And so we came, and we just really love the community, and they're a serving people, and we really love that and feel like we just fit right in from the moment that we began our interviews with them. And but shortly after we got here, about 2 or 3 months after, is when the coronavirus pandemic put us all in social distancing mode. And so since then, we've been doing online services and just being really creative with that. How do you engage, especially young people, over Zoom and over YouTube? But God's been really faithful to provide, I think, the creativity and innovation to be able to do that and
Mhm.
to adapt. But we've started meeting in person again, and we just really, we love the opportunity to be at this church. We love the students and the community. So
Oh, that's great. That's great.
yeah,
So, the title of this is Let's Talk Immigration. And
yeah,
so, tell me a little bit about your story, how you came
sure.
to the US and what that means.
Yeah, well, I came to the US when I was 5. And, we came, temporary protected status was enacted. There were horrible earthquakes in El Salvador. My parents' practice was leveled, just a lot of destruction. And really, El Salvador was just years. Um, Distant from the end of their civil war too. And so, for a country to experience a civil war that was, as you can imagine, incredibly destabilizing, and then to experience hurricanes, and then to experience earthquakes, it was really hard for the country. And my parents decided to stay in the US. And since then, we lived in California, and then we moved to Texas. And to be honest, I think one of the things that has made the last few years so difficult is that I haven't had to think a whole lot about immigration all of my life. Really, I don't think I knew we had immigrated here. I knew I spoke a different language. So did my parents. I knew the cultural aspects of it that made me different. But as far as my status, because people who have been on temporary protected status have never had a point in time where they've been undocumented. Nothing in my life was ever different. My parents have always worked very normal jobs. Uh, we've lived lives that haven't been necessarily in fear of anything. And so, a few years ago, January of 2018, our status was rescinded. And that really turned our lives upside down. And I think what it really did too, as I've been processing the last few years of my life, is it created kind of a timer, it seemed like, on my life. So when it was rescinded, the date that was given when all TPS holders had to leave the country was September 9th of 2019. And so then the countdown began to September 9th, 2019. And I remember I'd see food that would expire on September 9th, 2019, and or that would, and it all was a constant
Became real.
reminder. Yeah, exactly. That my life felt like it was all of a sudden on a timer. And it was just a really big shock from just living a normal life to that. It was really difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Tell me a little bit about the TPS status and what you have to go through. I know that you have to re-register on, is it an annual basis?
It's every 18 months.
Every 18 months?
Yes.
Tell
So
me a little bit about that.
yeah, so since I was 5, every 18 months, my parents and also children, we've had to re-register. You pay a fee every time that you file with USCIS, and you get fingerprints done every 18 months. And so it's just an ongoing every 18 months kind of process with temporary protected status.
And tell me, how many in your family?
Yeah, so it's my mom and my dad, and then myself. I'm the oldest. I'm 25, and then I have a brother, and he is 21, and then I have a little sister who is 15.
So your sister was born here.
Yeah, she was. She was born here. She was a little miracle baby.
And this week,
Yeah.
we had a new decision that had protected or extended that 2019 date.
Yeah.
And so we've had a recent court decision that has rescinded that. And so what does that mean to your life today?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think I've grown a lot over the last 3 years since the decision was first made. I've learned how to trust better, how to trust God in the everyday, that I don't have to feel like I need to solve all of the problems of the world, and that I can live in His peace. And so I think I had been busy living life until Monday. I had been plugging into my church, and making relationships with students, and figuring out how to organize our program to best run. I had been kind of back to normal life in some ways, because these different court injunctions had pushed the timeline back. And so there was really not a whole lot that we could do. And Monday, I was actually going into a meeting on racial reconciliation with my church family. We're just dreaming about what God would have us to do in our community. And I was about to enter into that meeting. I was physically going in when I received the news. And I think it was really difficult to hear. And I think what it did too was it forced me to have to face all of the things that we've been facing in the last 3 years that have just honestly been really difficult and really draining. And also, Kenneth and I, we want to start a family, and we have a real passion for foster care. And there are just so many things that we want to do that I think in the last 3 years, we've felt like we've had to kind of put them on hold just because of the uncertainty of everything. And so I think it was a real earth-stopping moment for me on Monday.
Yeah. And just so that the audience understands, you are a permanent resident.
Yes, I am. Yes.
So, but your extended family, your parents, your brother,
Yes.
are still
On
would
temporary
would
protected status.
yeah,
Yeah.
would be impacted by this decision.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but I am a resident now. I've been a resident for a year now, and I feel extremely privileged about that. But also, my sister is 15,
Mhm.
and so this really directly affects her life and my life, because if my parents are forced to leave the country, then Kenneth and I are gaining a 15-year-old resident in our home, which we love her, but also I'm a youth pastor, and I help students every day when their families, are falling apart, or through divorce, or through separations, and it burdens me as a youth pastor, I think, to think of all of the kids who will be in the same situation as Sophie. Family unity is so important to kids, and divorce is a growing, I think, epidemic in our country, and it just it really grieves me to think of all of the forced separations that will happen and how that will impact our young people.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. I think the number of TPS was somewhere around 200,000. So that's huge, and that doesn't include the families that
Yes,
will
and
be.
actually, I believe that the number, that's the number for just El Salvador.
Okay.
So once you factor in all of the other countries that are also on temporary protected status, the number is a lot closer to 300,000, if not 400,000.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of families are going to be in
Hmm.
disruption. Uh,
Right. And like you said, that doesn't include all of the US citizen children that will be
because,
impacted.
like you, many who have come on TPS have been here a long time, some
Yes.
20 years,
Yes.
and
Over 2 decades.
have homes, have purchased homes, and are really a part of the fabric of the communities that they live in.
Yeah. I think of my family, and I think, far reaching impact that this will have just on my community if my parents were to have to leave. My dad, for example, he's the program director at the healthcare college that he works at for the dental department. But he's also a pastor of a Spanish congregation. And actually, they're very bilingual. So they have both Spanish speaking and English speaking congregants who attend his service and are a part of his leadership team. And he's a really big part of their lives. And my mom works also in healthcare. My brother is also a youth pastor, and so we love our communities. And I think what sets TPS apart, and what is a really important nuance to understand about it, is that because people who are on TPS have always been documented, we've always had the ability to have work permits. We are so deeply rooted into our communities. We are business owners and healthcare workers and educators, teachers. Oh my goodness, teachers are so important right now,
Yeah.
and healthcare workers, and we're pastors and parents and mentors and volunteers. It's just this is our home, and that's kind of what I was trying to convey earlier. Of That's why it's been so difficult for me to be faced with these things that have happened, these cancellations, because my life is here. You know, I came to the US, and I think I represent so many others who came to the US when they were 5. My brother was 3. I know the Pledge of Allegiance here. I know the anthem here. I know US history really well. In fact, I was in advanced placement US history in high school, you know, and I'm a history buff. I love US history. This is our country. I don't know El Salvador's national anthem. You know, I know very little bits and pieces of El Salvador's history because of my family and, you know, just casual conversations. This is where our lives are. This is the communities that we're invested in and that we love. And so I think that's what's really difficult about TPS.
Yeah, I agree. I know so many families that, are working alongside in this time of pandemic, working in the medical community and in the hospitality industry, and
Yeah, exactly.
really are major parts of communities. And so we're just hoping that we will see some relief from
Yeah.
this decision. So I understand there's families have about 18 months, is it, to put their lives in order, put their affairs in order?
Yes, I think the date that I've been hearing now is March. It's March of 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? There's lots of things that give me hope. Jesus gives me hope. Over the last 3 years, and I don't say this as just the answer from a pastor, but I say this as someone who has trusted in Jesus long before I felt a call to ministry, long before TPS was canceled. But God has always been faithful in every circumstance, in every phase of my life, in everything. He's been faithful to give me the peace that I need for that day, the strength that I need for that day, the conviction that I need for that day. And over these last 3 years, God is my rock, and He's given me hope. The other thing that gives me hope is young people. I'm a youth pastor, and I love young people. They just have such an empathy, and not just that, but they see Jesus, and they read about his life, and they read his word, God's word, and they want to live it out. And that gives me so much hope. And then I think the last thing that gives me hope is stories. I've been thinking a lot about my story, about being a TPS holder, and also feeling very American in my heart. And now I am. I'm a permanent resident. And so now my documentation matches what I've always felt. But in the midst of this really trying time, my story has had, I think, a unifying effect, because we're at a time where things are so divided, and rightfully so. There are some hard things going on in our world, but I think what we can unite on is values. Values are what unite us, especially if we're evangelicals. And I think the sanctity of family and the sanctity of lives, that is an issue that we can find common unity on. And I think my story has provided the opportunity for really good and respectful and humility-driven dialogue to happen. And I've been incredibly fortunate to get to be a part of those conversations with people.
That's so good. Is there any last thoughts that you would like to share?
I think my thought that I'd love for people to think of is when they hear of things like temporary protected status, and when you hear of numbers like 200,000, 300,000 people, I really hope that what will happen is that people will think of my face, and that people will think of my dad, who is pouring into his jobs and his community, and my mom, who is the hardest working person I have ever met, my brother, who leads his teenagers with passion and with love, my little sister, who is thriving in school and in her youth group right now, and in all of the things that she's a part of, and that people will remember that although we talk about numbers, to see faces of real people, real, and for my Christian brothers and sisters, to see people who are made in the image and likeness of God, and to think of that when they hear of these numbers. I really believe that issues that seem very black and white, that God will begin to reveal to us that there's a lot more gray in them, and that there's an opportunity for us to have laws and to have rules, but to also be a nation that's ruled by compassion and some of the values that have made us the United States of America.
Andrea, it's so good to see your face today. It's been
Yeah.
a while since we've been able to connect
Yeah.
because of COVID. I
Yes.
was in the process of moving, and you, as you moved to Houston, I was moving to Oklahoma. So it's
Yes.
really good to see you, and know that you and your family are in my prayers.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time
Yeah.
to visit with me this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you for all you do. It's appreciated.